everybody. Great to be here. And I imagine that most of you are probably engaged with landscapes in some way already. Let me know if you are. Do you have some kind of engagement or connection with a landscape or nature? Yep, so this isn't about you. First law of behaviour change is that most people are not like you. And we've already heard today that we need more people to care. We really need more people to care about landscapes and about nature to make progress in the things that we've been talking about today. So I'm not talking about you today, I'm talking about other people. How do we get other people to connect and engage with place? And particularly, how do we get them to engage with future landscapes? How on earth do we get people to connect with a place they've never seen or been to, and nor has anybody else? How do we get them to connect with the unknown and perhaps even that which we can't imagine? So it's tricky. And we've already heard quite a bit today from John in particular about extinction and the threats and all the issues that are happening with extinction of species. There is also another form of extinction happening, which many of you will know about, which is the extinction of experience, aligned with this thing that we hear about called nature deficit disorder. This is where people's connection with nature and the environment and landscapes is heading downhill sharply and rapidly for a number of reasons. It's things like just the simple, I don't have time, the competing demands thing. Some people are scared of the environment and other things that it might mean. And the reality that today, half the world is urban. There's a nice example of this that William Bird did around Sheffield in the UK. And he looked at 4 different generations and how far they were allowed to roam to explore their territory. And you might have already seen this, but if you haven't, it's quite nice. So great-grandfather George Smith roamed 6 miles to go fishing. And his son was allowed to go about a mile to go down the woods. And his daughter was allowed to go half a mile to the swimming pool. But the current generation, Ed, he can go 300 yards to the end of the street. So no wonder that people are not engaging with place in the way that many of us might have, or certainly people in previous generations. Now, if you don't know what a mile is, and you don't know what that sort of distance means, I've put it in a local context, because here's La Trobe Uni, here's ARI, where I'm from, and a few of us, and here's Melbourne Uni. So this is where George would roam. George could have gone fishing down past ARI and down to Melbourne Uni and gone for a bit of a wander. That's quite a trek, really. Jack could have gone down to Waiora Road, Vicky down to the entrance, Ed, the current generation, probably the far bus stop is about it. So not much scope really for engaging with a lot of landscape in that sort of distance. So we can see why we have an issue here, a real issue. So let's think about what we know does work. What works in engaging people with nature now? And what are some of the things that we know we can apply now and that might also work in the future? Now, when I asked you about how many of you are engaged with landscape in some place, I think almost all of you put your hands up. And I would like you to think now about how that happened. And I would bet that most of it was because of a direct experience that you had in place. Somewhere that was wild or amazing or gorgeous or just wild. Something that really connected you with that place. For Mike, it's the prom. You know, everyone's got these magic places where they've connected you with in a really special way. So we know that direct experience works. It's not just what we know and we feel. There's loads of literature on this. And there's loads of literature that tells us particularly how this can work too. It's especially great if you're doing something meaningful, like citizen science. If you're doing something that's active in supporting that place, like planting trees. If you have a special wildlife encounter, you know, a gorilla in Rwanda or a southern right whale at Warrnambool, It's amazing, and you feel pretty special about it. If you do active walking, which is a thing where you are really mindfully taking notice of what's around you, that can also have a bigger impact as well. So we know these things work. The next thing that the literature tells us, and there's a really lovely thing called Beyond Ecophobia. If you're interested in this stuff, I suggest you check it out. It's really interesting. And it talks about the different ways of connecting people at different stages in their life. So when you're a little kid in primary school, a bit like Ed in a way, I suppose, the most important way is to connect with the places that are near you and close to you and within your sort of home environment, and that you work to build empathy for other animals or plants in that space. So we encourage kids to make a nest out of found objects, or make some wings out of found objects and pretend that they are a bird. We get them to have empathy for the things in that place, and that sort of familiar space and building empathy and familiarity with local things is really important in primary age. And then in secondary age, teenagers want to go a bit further. So they go into town and they hang around the local park, and they do it with their friends. It becomes a social encounter. So we know that if we create activities that support that, we can connect teenagers in that way. And then in tertiary level and into adults, they begin to become change makers. They go out into the world and they do stuff. With Billy Geary here this morning, Billy Geary is part of this wild Melbourne mob. They're doing all sorts of fantastic things, very much connected with the landscape. So there's sort of those three tiers depending on the development stage at which people are at. And I have a suspicion that culturally and linguistically diverse communities probably will have best chance of engaging in if we do the thing about local, safe, familiar places and help people build empathy. But that's just a hunch, I don't have literature on that. Another one is about a responsible adult. So being introduced, if you like, in almost a buddy way by somebody who can show you and introduce you and connect you with how wow these places can be. A very powerful thing. So for some of you it might have been a parent or an uncle or aunt or a neighbour or somebody that you just knew who, you know, could really do that well. And that's where a lot of the existing champions that we know can play that role very powerfully. And then there's story and art and the virtual connect. And I take the point about Attenborough, and yet that can be a really powerful portal into a more useful and advocacy kind of role. And we don't actually really want everybody to physically connect with nature necessarily. When we have this massively increasing population, maybe a virtual connect is okay if that person is then becomes a pretty good advocate for place. So we know that story is really important, local stories, all kinds of stories. Art is important in telling the stories behind place as well. I love this piece. I don't know if you know it, but this is John Wolseley talking about the Keeling curve. So he's telling the story of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere with all these burnt things from the Mallee, and there's a beautiful text that goes with it. So these concepts that can be taught to us and connected to us through art and story and performance and all those things, I think are fabulous. And again, many people might have, you know, grown up with National Geographic or the Jane Goodall stuff or David Attenborough, those things. Thinking about behaviour change again, which I made brief mention on earlier, one of the most powerful things is social norms. If all your friends are doing something, you're probably going to want to do that too. So if there's a familiar network around you that is connected or engaged with the landscape, potentially even doing something active for that landscape, there's every chance you'll get engaged in that too. And today, social media plays a really important role in demonstrating that connect that different people might have. And I suspect that's not going away soon. And then many of you may have been involved, and we've heard a few examples today actually about what I call community conversations, but that can cover a whole range of different activity in which we have very focused conversations about the values we hold for a particular place and the things that are important to us about it and how we want to interact with that into the future. One of those processes is called motivational interviewing, which actually helps people surface their own values and translate that into action. And there's a whole realm of different activities in that space that can be very powerful. So those are all things that we're doing right now that we know connect people with landscapes that are familiar to us and that we're working in right now. But the future is a place that we don't know, and it's a place that's unfamiliar. So I'm curious about how can we connect people with a place that is unfamiliar. And a little story I want to tell you is about a similar kind of idea of connecting people with a place that is both geographically and culturally unfamiliar to most of us. And that's Antarctica. Now, I'm a member of a group of women, and we went to Antarctica, and one of the things we wanted to find out was how do people respond to a place like Antarctica, which is wild, remote, unfamiliar, quite different from what most of us are used to. And we've just written up some of this at the Rachel Carson Centre, which I hugely commend to any of you if you have the opportunity to go there. So in Antarctica, we wanted to know not just, what do people see, but what do people see, what do they hear, what do they smell, what do they taste, how do they feel about this wild place where they have no connection with their normal support network. It looks very different from where they live. They're doing things completely different from where they live, and it's strange and disconnected and sometimes a bit unsettling, and you don't know what time of day it is, you don't know what day it is, you don't know what week it is, you have no idea where you are. These things are different, and we wanted to know how people responded. So we asked them all those questions, and I'm going to show you 3 examples of people who are in different kinds of spaces in connection to Antarctica. So this one is from a woman who has never been to Antarctica, never been interested in Antarctica, never really thought about Antarctica, and wrote this in response to one of our questions. And I'll let you have a quick read of it, but basically the key words that come out of that for me are grey. And I struggled to find a picture that was dull enough to complement the text. For me, this is a person who is struggling to engage with the place. It hasn't hit the spark. There's no spark there of Antarctica for this person. And it's like they don't have the language. They keep defaulting back to grey. And then there are human construct things that she's latching onto, like the ship and the cabin window. And if this is all sounding a bit weird to you, it is to me too, because this is my first foray really into social sciences. So this is quite intriguing. But anyway, keep with us. So this is another of our subjects, if you like. And this person, it was the first time to Antarctica, but after reading about Antarctica for 30 years. So more connection, more interest. There's a bit more of a spark happening there. And one of the things that was really evident to us when we read a lot of this stuff was that cultural background really informs how you respond to place. So a meringue that you've scooped around the edges like some massive continental pavlova. Now I'll confess this is me. I said this. I'm an Australian, and Costa Rican and American who were with us said, "What is pavlova?" So I didn't even think about that. I've since discovered that quite a few Australian Antarctic writers have said that Australians should think about pavlova. Anyway, your culture plays a role. Now, there's no way you're going to read all of this, but I wanted to let you know that Monica is still talking about Antarctica. Monica never stops talking about Antarctica. Monica has been going to Antarctica for, it's 25 years now, as an historian and a guide and an expedition leader, and she knows so much about Antarctica, and Antarctica is part of her very being. And when Monica talks about Antarctica, she tells us about history and place and also scientific processes of things that are happening there. She knows the names of things, she knows what's going on. So one of the things that this taught us about how you connect with place is how important language is. And we've heard that word many times today. But language is so important in how we connect people and how we get people to frame a place and make their own connection into it. So language is key. So we wanted to think about, we want people to be able to connect with Antarctica, but we don't want them to go there because it doesn't need a heap more people going there. So how can we get them to engage in an imaginative way, which is like we're talking about here. How do we get people to engage with an imagined future? And the things that we're thinking about are things like story, art, virtual reality, and the right connecting language and frames. And I see that there's this thing called Polar Force coming on at the Arts Centre soon, which is exactly that sort of stuff. So go check it out. Now, we weren't just asking people about response to Antarctica. We were also doing this very deliberately to practice multidisciplinary process. We wanted to test out what it's like for us, natural scientists, physical scientists, and social scientists to work together. And I have to tell you, it took us a whole year to understand each other, again because of language. But it definitely widened our thinking, and it had a heap of different benefits. And Margaret, one of the people in our team, I think describes this really well. And she talked about how it really helps you see connections between ideas that weren't previously apparent. And it can help you make huge leaps in understanding. There are lots of benefits in working in a multidisciplinary team. And I think this is going to be increasingly important for us as we need to work on wicked problems with lots of actors and perspectives, and we need to be responsive to unexpectedness, complexity, and change. Simple way to look at this is this thing around change and where we're at. You know, if we're here in a time continuum, and this isn't actually, shouldn't be human progress, it should be change, societal change. If this is your past and there's been little change, you can expect that the future will probably be like this, and that the past understanding will be useful for the future. Or if you're a Doctor Who fan and you're up this end, well, you can probably imagine that the next one will probably be a white man, right? Because that's the pattern. But if instead you realise, actually, we are here and there's this accelerated change happening, particularly in technology, and that our old maps and patterns of the future don't really apply anymore. The future is different, and we need different understandings. We need an acknowledgement of emergent phenomena. We need a systems-wider thinking, and we really need these multiple and transdisciplinary approaches to make it work. So, of course, the next Doctor Who is a woman. And if you took the wider systems thinking, of course, it's obvious that was going to happen, wasn't it? So, at ARI, we don't have a TARDIS, but we do have an ecological time machine, which helps us look at brings a whole lot of diverse data in and lets us look at different things that are happening in the environment and how it's happening with landscape change. But although these are kind of about the physical environment, they actually tell us social stuff too, of course. So if you look at Melbourne's western suburbs, look at the brown bits, the urban, and its change over 10 years is pretty remarkable. If we look at the Western District of Victoria, 85 to 90, watch this woody, exotic blue gums, basically, down the bottom, the pinky colour, and they really, really change. So this is a social change because this is in response to tax incentives and options and things that people can do in terms of investment. It's not about climate or things like that. So we think these sorts of models are tools for the future, along with a whole lot of things we know about motivations and behaviour and how people change. So all those things we talked about before we can apply, and we can also apply these ideas about working landscapes where we integrate biodiversity and other land uses in a more integrated way, that we really acknowledge the role of urban nature and expose and give visibility and focus on nature in urban environments, that we ramp up that use of art, music and story, find the language and framing, use virtual reality and other technologies to help people connect, use extreme events to connect people with natural and human recovery. I've talked about this before and some of you might know I've got a real thing about this. I think it's a real opportunity. Use citizen science. We know it's worked effectively, but now we have amazing technology to make it work even better. And use community conversations to get people imagining the future. This is some participatory scenario planning that was done in the wet tropics. These are 3 different futures that were imagined and have been transferred onto photorealistic images of different futures that are possible to help that conversation. Now, all of these are about the unknown. So as well as all these tools, I don't think I can emphasise enough how important relationships and trust are in this process. So they're all things that we can do from a practical perspective in how we work with communities. The other side of this, of course, is what are the research opportunities in this space? And there are many, and I really believe that they need to be connected together in a multi- and transdisciplinary approach. There are all those different fields which can be really talking to each other in a powerful way, in the way that Margaret recognised so powerfully when we were in Antarctica. So this is what I'm encouraging people to do. And I have a favourite quote from Christiana Figueres, the UN climate change guru, who says, "If not us, then who?" And I challenge all of you to be part of this, because I think it is up to all of us in this room and the people who left because they had important things to do, to build relationships and trust. Collaborate with the weird. You know, the people that, I don't know what those people do, but it's kind of connected. I think I should talk with them. Connect with them and work with them. And I think the benefits are huge. Explore, choose, shape those futures. And together, I really believe that we can create sustainable future landscapes or country, not with people and nature, but people in nature. Because if not us, then who? Thank you.